Mark Carney just made it official. He'll compete to become the next leader of the Liberal Party, which means, if successful, he takes Justin Trudeau's place as Prime Minister.
I'm back home in Edmonton to declare my candidacy for leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada.
But what's interesting is that even before he announced, the world was already talking about him.
Mr. Carney.
Mark Carney.
Mark Carney.
And since the day Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, Mark Carney was a favorite to replace him. The favorite, depending on who you read. Rock star economist Mark Carney, a frontrunner. The Liberal leadership is Mark Carney's to lose. And a recent Leger poll suggested, among Liberals, he's the one to beat, a 6-point lead over his next closest competitor. And if you really want to know who's most likely to win, just look at who the party's enemies are attacking.
Mark Carney, carbon tax Carney.
So what explains Carney's rise in a party he's not even an elected member of?
You want an outsider.
Carney referred to himself in the segment as an outsider in Canada's political realm.
Please welcome to the program, Mark Carney. I welcome you to our land, America.
A big part of understanding Mark Carney's momentum among Liberals starts with understanding how people even know him to begin with. As the governor of the Bank of Canada, named by Stephen Harper's Conservative government during the worst economic catastrophe of a generation.
The crash of September 2008 brought the largest bankruptcies in world history.
The 2008 financial crisis was the deepest global recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And it was during this time of subprime mortgages, the housing bubble, banking collapses, mass unemployment, trillions of dollars of global wealth wiped out, that Mark Carney's star really rose.
Businesses should not be afraid of their banks. They should be bringing ideas and opportunities to their banks.
At the time, Mark Carney's whole job was monetary policy. And one of his early moves as the head of the Bank of Canada, while the world was burning around him, was to aggressively cut interest rates. Within a month of becoming governor, Carney slashed the bank's key rate by a half point. This was the biggest single move swing the Bank of Canada had executed in years. He would do that again about a month and a half later, and shortly after Lehman Brothers in the US declared bankruptcy, the climax of the crisis, Carney would cut the rate a third time. By now, a total of 1.5 percentage points from where he had started. The idea was to stimulate the economy, get people borrowing and spending at a time when consumer confidence had been shattered. Other central bankers were doing this too. The US Federal Reserve also cut rates aggressively, but not everyone did. While Canada's rates were being cut over and over again, the European Central Bank, their rate actually rose until they got the idea. Drastic cuts were needed. That's the difference Carney's supporters point to, while other central bankers were criticized for being too conservative. Also, too uncommunicative. Another major shift in Bank of Canada policy was how Carney talked to Canadians.
The notion for the central banks, both the Bank of Canada and pretty much every central bank around the world, is they would tell you on the occasion of their meetings what they were going to do right then and there, end of sentence. And that was over. And they really gave no hint about what they had in mind in the future. And that was the situation up to when Mark Carney was the governor.
It's easy to understate how unconventional this was at the time. This idea that central banks didn't just have the lever of interest rates to change the course of the economy. They could also just say their expectations out loud. And that in itself could alter the course of an economy.
And by changing the nature of the communications, the Bank of Canada and other central banks gave a greater degree of confidence. You're going to be able to borrow money cheaply for quite some time.
Now, there's obviously more to Carney's time at the Bank of Canada than what I can outline here. And Canada's banking system itself, very tightly regulated, was already fairly resilient to what brought down the American banking system. But Carney's legacy after leaving was being credited as the man steering Canada away from the worst consequences of the global financial crisis. Canada was the only G7 country to avoid a major banking collapse, and it rebounded from its recession quicker than most. Expect his supporters to repeat this a lot. A big consideration for Liberals in search of a new leader will be how resilient that person will be to attack.
They're all Justin Trudeau. They're all just like Justin.
You're going to hear this question come up again and again about whether Carney is a Liberal insider or an outsider. Just ask Jon Stewart.
A wild hypothetical. Let's say the candidate wasn't part of the government. Let's say the candidate did have a lot of economic experience. Let's say the candidate did deal with crises. Let's say the candidate had a plan to deal with the challenges in the here and now.
Sneaky, you're running as an outsider.
I am an outsider.
This is important because every Liberal knows the challenge for whomever replaces Justin Trudeau is to do everything they can to distance themselves from Justin Trudeau.
So you're going to be coming in there to say, I have not been in the government. I have worked in the financial markets. I understand all the things that go around trade.
I think in this case, the Liberals would benefit from having someone who has less of a connection to the Trudeau government. I think that when you see just how unpopular the Liberal government has been, that is an asset for him.
It's the same obstacle that hurt Kamala Harris's election campaign when she was asked,
would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Not exactly a good look when voters are looking for a change candidate. So, is Mark Carney
just like Justin?
Or is he something else? Well, Carney is an outsider to the extent that he's never served in any elected role. He went to Harvard, did his postgrad at Oxford, spent 13 years at Goldman Sachs, and we know his basic story at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England after that. So he's a finance guy, but really, he's not a complete outsider.
He was a sort of informal advisor. As things got worse for the Liberals and as the rumors grew that he was interested in maybe being even prime minister one day, there was a real effort to bring him into the Liberal fold. So they said, well, hey, why don't you take on an advisory role? You can give us some advice officially advising the Liberal Party on economic matters.
It's this most recent role that has Conservatives questioning to what extent was Mark Carney not just an advisor to Trudeau, but complicit in his governance.
I have been talking with Mark Carney for years now about getting him to join federal politics.
Mark Carney has not been an opponent to the Trudeau government or a critic of it, and he did take a position heading up an economic task force in the last few months. So he is not by any means disassociated from the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau.
And let's not forget, there is tension with the Chrystia Freeland-Mark Carney story, right? We know that obviously it was very dramatic, the way she left government, that she was no longer going to be the finance minister. There has been reporting based on unnamed sources to suggest Mark Carney was going to slide into that role. And that is perhaps part of the reason Chrystia Freeland felt that she was being demoted and decided to walk away.
Those Liberals who support Carney, who would coronate him today if they could, their gamble is that Canadians will see Mark Carney as someone who brings something new to the table. But let's also be straight here. The uphill climb is real. The Liberals are drastically behind in every poll. Carney is entirely new to retail politics. He's never run an election campaign before. But if Carney does win the Liberal leadership, he becomes prime minister, even if it's only for a matter of days. And that would be a whole new plateau in his leap from the world of finance to the world of politics.